Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well on this fine Thursday. I'm Brooks. Welcome to the Quarantine Collective. We are doing our ongoing reading of Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle as we go through every paragraph, read bit by bit, ask every question we've got. We are on page 32, and let me actually just jump over to the reading section. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. There it is. Look at that. Look at how fancy that is. All right. This is where I was supposed to be last week, but apologies last week. Things got pushed out. How do I even start this off? Because it's been 2 weeks. This book from the beginning, Klossowski is very, very open about what he is doing, and Dan Smith's translation, I think, makes it exceptionally clear. The goal here is not to try to reinterpret Nietzsche through other thinkers, but instead to presume, hey, Nietzsche's writing about the way life is or how experience works. What if we actually, with that, go, hey, what if we read Nietzsche through that? What if we read Nietzsche through? Welcome, Meme of Tomorrow, to the collective. If we're reading Nietzsche through Nietzsche, if we're presuming that his experiences are actually what he's writing about, and we can actually do this, then music's still playing. Of course it is. Sorry. As we're reading through Nietzsche and as we're going through this, the big deal is talking about Nietzsche's experiential life as we know it, as he wrote about it, from his private journals to letters that we have to also his writings. We should not regard his letters as personal, but his writings as not. We need to regard all of it as quite personal, all of it as part of not just his experience, but him sharing with us what his experience was. Significantly more interesting and playful that way, I think. So, last week, let's see, where were we last week? I'm gonna read the previous little bit here, and because it's a short paragraph, and then we'll just move straight forward, and we're just gonna burn straight through this. To restore these corporealizing forces, the impulses, to thought amounts to an expropriation of the agent, of the self. Yet Nietzsche brought about this restoration and expropriation through his brain. He used his lucidity to penetrate the shadows. But how can one remain lucid if one destroys the locus of lucidity, namely the self? What would this consciousness be without an agent? How can memory subsist if it has to deal with things that no longer belong to the self? How can we remember as a being that can remember everything except itself? Nietzsche's researches in the biological and physiological sciences stemmed from a double preoccupation. First, to find a mode of behavior in the organic and inorganic world that was analogous to his own valetudinary state. And second, based on this mode of behavior, to find the arguments and resources that would allow him to recreate himself beyond his own self. Physiology, as he understood it, would thus provide him with the premises of a liberatory conception of the forces that lay subjacent not only to his own condition, but also to the various situations he was living through in the context of his epoch. Nietzsche's investigations into science had the same aim as his investigations into art or into contemporary and past political events. This is why he resorted to various terminologies, to which he gave equivocal turns of phrase. When borrowing from the various disciplines, he gave them his own emphasis and pursued a vision that escaped them, a vision which, because of its experimental character, lacked any objective consideration. Again, Klossowski writes, I think, fairly crisply, to be frank. And it's one of the reasons I very much enjoy the book. This is not a super wild set of statements from him that we're kind of going with, at least as I read it. The whole point here is connecting sort of Nietzsche's, as he began doing his scientific investigations, and I put that in quotes because it is not what we would talk about when we say that. It's a unique thing that he was doing, but because he's doing it through kind of this philosophical project of self-transformation. He is very aware that he's doing it for this purpose through himself and changing as he's doing it. There's the line here, the double preoccupation that he's got is ultimately sort of autobiographical and also universalizing. It's particular and global at the same time, right? So his personal conditions that Nietzsche is going through, and Nietzsche writes extensively about them, not just in his personal writings, as Klossowski has very, very clearly outlined at this point, but also in his writings that most of us have had access to or have read, Beyond Good and Evil, Gay Science, all of these things. He's very clear that he's talking about sort of himself and the things as he's experienced them, but that there are broad philosophical insights inside of these things and how he's playing with it. His sickness, his own, and again, the word is a hell of a thing, valetudinary state. My money would be that this carried through the translation, because this is playing into a word that Nietzsche is really used often with Nietzsche. It means sickly. This is Nietzsche was not a super healthy guy. Nietzsche was not a guy who was like, at the gym every day and eating health foods and not having, just, he was sickly. His illnesses were chronic. That is how he functioned. That is very much sort of part and parcel of Nietzsche's setup. So for him, instead of seeking health as being the normative position, which tends to be what we do, we think of health as being normative. For him, from the kind of, as Klossowski's writing here, the pathology of things, the sicknesses of things, and the processes through this lens of the pathological was Nietzsche's jam. And so that whole reevaluation that he's doing of traditional values, this is again the thrust of and the sort of impetus of what Nietzsche would end up going on to do for most of his writings from this point on until the end of his life, is about the inversion of these traditional values, is about reevaluating what these things mean as he goes, more or less. And yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to put it. One sec, sorry, my brother's writing. Let's see, where was I? Sorry. Get texts, you got to take them sometimes. Second, based on mode of behavior, find the arguments, resources, allow him to recreate himself beyond his own self. There is paradoxically in Nietzsche, and it's one of the things that I think naturally brings I don't want to say a mystification, but that adds to this sort of mystique, or the way that things come across within Nietzsche's work, because he plays in the space of things that seem on its face paradoxical or are paradoxical. He's seeking the self, seeking to explain the self without the self. Oop. All right. Cocaine Communist, if you can mute up. Thank you. Hell of a username. But like the idea that a philosopher is almost a self-overcoming lab, like as a thing, that's the thing that they do. That they make this progression from observation to arguments and this setup. And this is the way that he went through all of his things, his art, contemporary, past political events. This is why he played into and used these various terminologies, as he talks about it, right? Because it for Nietzsche, there wasn't really a need to, even though he did utilize the jargon of various disciplines, the divisions between them were artificial. They're made by us because ultimately, this methodology or the way of Nietzsche considering these things worked across disciplines, played with these disciplines in a lot of different ways. Instead of this academic hyperspecialization, like I always like joke and say, Nietzsche wasn't a philosopher, he was a philologist, which is a stupid fucking word, but philology was a thing. But again, it's an academic break-off of a thing that generally we do consider as part of philosophy today. But why do we have all these different things? Well, for Nietzsche, that was kind of one of the things. You needed to treat science, art, and politics as expressions of the same underlying forces, or force configurations of the forces, I should say. And so his work, and it's one of the reasons, again, Deleuze and others who very much do the same thing, really play into the same stuff. And it's why he's so absolutely invaluable to them, flatly. And this is why he resorted to various terminologies, which he gave increasingly equivocal turns of phrase. Nietzsche was a philologist. Philology is the study of language and the repetition of language and almost grammatical analysis of languages and how languages move over time. And this background, which is really the thread through all of Nietzsche. This is why he resorted to various terminologies. The thread through Nietzsche of his sort of linguistic ideation, or how he considered it, where instead of creating new vocabularies, instead what he ended up doing is he took current discourse of the time and altered their meaning, right? And we'll get to a handful of these. Klossowski's going to launch into a bunch of examples, so I'm not going to do that. But the way that these words can be used across these different disciplines or in different ways, but also shift their meaning, is basically this way that he was able to bring out from that meaning this aphoristic, odd thing, while still keeping the experimentality of it. And that is the experimental character lacked any objective consideration. He's able to utilize the words and fuck with them at the same time, which is kind of like the best part. It's one of the things that's enjoyable about Nietzsche. He always is playing with these things. And it's one of the reasons I find his writing generally pretty entertaining. For me at least. And we can move on. We've got a handful of examples coming up here. Immediately we can dive right into, I'm just going to go straight into them because this was kind of a basic paragraph. Any questions on this before I do that, though? Because I don't want to bulldoze people and make it seem like, if you're not following, feel free to give a question, because that's the whole point. You can type it up, send it via chat, any of those fun things. They're all pretty available to you. And if there's nothing, I'm happily going to just keep fucking moving. All right, fair enough. Since the body is the self, soi, the self resides in the midst of the body and expresses itself through the body. For Nietzsche, this was already a fundamental position. Everything his brain had refused him lay hidden in his corporeal life, this intelligence that was larger than the seat of the intelligence. All evil and suffering are the result of the quarrel between the body's multiplicity with its millions of vague impulses and the interpretive stubbornness of the meaning bestowed on it by the brain. It is from the body, from the self, that every creative force, every evaluation arises. It is from their cerebral inversion that mortal specters are born, starting with a voluntary ego, a mind deprived of itself. Likewise, the other person, the neighbor, is nothing but a projection of the self through the inversions of the mind. The you, the toi, has no more reality than the me, moi, except as a pure modification of the self. Sod. I think that's supposed to be soi. Toi, moi, soi. They're playing, Klossowski in here is playing with French language. It doesn't come through here as it does in the French. The self finally exists in the body only as a prolonged extremity of chaos. Impulses take on an organic, individualized form only when delegated by chaos. It was this delegation that now becomes Nietzsche's interlocutor. From high in the cerebral citadel, besieged, it is called madness. In the French, it reads, and it's intended to be playful in a very particular way. If you can imagine, in English, it doesn't read me, you, self, doesn't have the same like energy as moi, toi, soi. Like that's
Selbst. Selbst in German, right? Selbst. The self.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
But Klossowski didn't write in German. So we're talking about, so yeah, I mean, okay. So this is the point I'm making is that Klossowski, as he's doing it, is intending and playing on the sort of language games of French here. Because Klossowski originally wrote in French, even though he's talking about Nietzsche, who was written in German. It's a whole thing. And we're reading it in English, translated by someone else. So it's a whole thing. But the toi has no more reality than the moi, except as pure modification of the soi, is kind of the joke. Like, he's making the point that none of this actually exists meaningfully, that these are more interchangeable. Again, playing with the language of it, which is, again, a very Nietzschean thing to very much do here. Because this is the point, is like the way Nietzsche played with and came to these bits of language and how he ended up using them. Since the body is the self, the soi, it resides in the midst of the body, expresses itself through the body. This is the somatic side of things, the self that resides in the midst of the body. We went through this a little bit earlier. Again, we're going to be coming up on it again. But this is the Selbst, and this is for Nietzsche, just to go back to it, the Selbst, which you were talking about, Marcellus, for Nietzsche has double meaning. On the one hand, it is, morally speaking, the Selbstsucht. I'm not going to pronounce German ever. The greediness of the self, which is erroneously translated as egoism. And on the other hand, it is force, unconscious to the cerebral consciousness, which obeys a hidden region. The Selbst, on the one hand.
Selbstsucht.
Yeah, that's.
Selbstsucht.
Yeah. I hate that language. I will never pronounce it correctly. Selbstsucht. What? That's great. But
yeah,
that's great. So it's on the one hand, the use of self in Nietzsche, he plays in one side. There is the greediness of the self-greed, the setup there, but also the unconscious force that obeys hidden reason. Now, this whole thing means that the subject, like the conscious subject, is not really the Selbst, but instead the body's own intelligence. As the body exists, this pre-individual, pre-conscious principle that sort of operates through the corporeal processes. It's not egoism, which a lot of people, his sister and a lot of bad readings of Nietzsche have read the way that Nietzsche reads things that way. Because then it's the ego, that. No. There is a greed underneath it. It's a drive that he's talking about here. And again, this is very different than, say, Descartes. I think, therefore I am, that type of self or subjectivity, because rather than the mind that uses the body as instrument, for Nietzsche, the body actually has wisdom that exceeds or even precedes consciousness itself. And this is where he then sort of leads into that next little bit. Everything, just to read through it, everything his brain had refused him lay hidden in corporeal life. This intelligence was larger than the seat of the intelligence. The larger intelligence of the body encompasses a somatic intelligence. We tend to think of our brain as being the thing that is intelligent and what thinks, and we tend to think of intelligence as thinking, like IQ test thinking, solving abstract problems, being able to cognize and talk through things. This is how we tend to talk about the way that intelligence works. But there is somatic intelligence, the body's itself, the body's capacity to process information, to evaluate on its own, and it does a lot of this, and also to respond to the world.
Not just logical chains of causality, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's almost like you do a Nietzsche reading once or twice a week. That was August. Join our other Nietzsche readings. You should. How are you doing this much Nietzsche in one day, by the way? It's a lot, August. But this, again, not to say Nietzsche predicted the future, but these are things that, like, there are ties that we're finding in even in what I would call traditional empirical sciences, where the bodily health actually affects how you're able to understand and have intelligence at all. That there's a weird linkage between, like, the gut and the brain in modern neuroscience. All of these things that aren't just the traditional abstract, concrete thought causation chain. This whole entire thing for Nietzsche, he comes at this because, again, he's not thinking about health as the normative. He's actually looking at everything through this sort of lived experience of sickness. The phrase "everything his brain had refused him" that is used here, is Nietzsche talks about this. His body and his mind didn't work correctly, and I'm putting that in giant fucking air quotes for those of you who can't see me, giant air quotes, because for Nietzsche, that is what opened up a side door to him, because he could see the things that were closed off and refused him. This chronic illness opened access to intelligence he wasn't even aware of, or that normally was filtered out by conscious cognition. Right? It's a big deal to Nietzsche here. The somatic, the bodily, very Spinoza. If you're into Spinoza, if you're not, you should. But very Spinoza. But the idea of the bodily is big here. So Klossowski goes on to say, all evil and suffering are the result of the quarrel between the body's multiplicity with its millions of vague impulses and the interpretive stubbornness of the meaning bestowed on it by the brain. So in Nietzsche's psychology, the multiplicitous body, someone is going to help me here. I have a feeling it's Marcellus. This is the Willheit, I believe.
Where is it?
It's not in this. No, this is in my notes. This is in my notes because I have a bunch of Nietzsche notes.
I don't know. I'm bad at German. I'm good at reading, but
good at reading, bad at German. Fair enough. But so the multiplicitous body for Nietzsche stands opposed to what we tend to understand, or what we consider the normality. But for him, he sees as this interpretive tyranny that the brain has through the unification that it's doing, because the brain pulls all of it together. I mean, the sentence is really nice. Klossowski is a poet and a writer for a reason that I love, but the brain bestows meaning stubbornly on millions of vague impulses that the body is made of. Right? This is the interpretive stubbornness. And this is actually like, again, these are straight out of Nietzsche terms. This is not even like, we're not at the weird part of Klossowski's reading yet. This is just Nietzsche so far. But it's a good read, but it's specifically pulling certain things out. But this is the interpretive stubbornness, because there is this inherent violence internal to you where there is a false unity imposed on the multiplicity of forces in the body. This entire thing, you'll start to recognize some terminology and tone from people who come on later, but it's kind of a lot. It is from the body, from the self, that every creative force and every evaluation arises. It is from their cerebral inversion mortal specters are born, starting with a voluntary ego, a mind deprived of itself. The bodily evaluation of things, the body's intelligence, the affective intelligence that sort of comes. This is, again, the selbst that we were talking about earlier, that self, the creative force of that personal greed, the ego greed, the self-greed that sort of exists there, connects to all of these things. The corporeal phenomenon of things, like the will to power, for example. But these things, what is made is, and the phrasing here is going to be really important, the cerebral inversion is the mortal specters. Specters, phantasms. This is the ego, free will, responsibility, these things we're aware of that are sort of the imago, the setup for Klossowski, the mortal specters. These are the phantasms, phantasmatic productions that obscure bodily origins. We don't tend to think of these things, the ego, free will, moral responsibility, as being formed of the body, right? We tend to think of those things as being formed out of our rational, cool, smart, very big-brained selves, and that we very much consider them, and that's how smart we are, and we're just the best. But instead, it's not really. From the body, from the self, that every creative force and every evaluation arises, that the affective response to things, the forces of the body at large, and then the brain comes along and stubbornly crushes it all, right? Into, oh, this is, what I think of that. This is my judgment. This is my moral responsibility. This is what I do like. This is what I don't like, whatever it may be. But the consciousness with this is basically fundamentally alienated from its own source. That's the next bit. But that's that end bit. A mind deprived of itself, fundamentally alienated from itself. This is at the time of this, alienation is a thing. This is, another guy was writing about alienation also, similar language and everything. But he placed alienation within production socially. For Nietzsche, it's within production internally, the production of the ego and all these things. And this is where we find that alienation and where we come to it. Likewise, the other person, the neighbor, is nothing but a projection of the self through the inversions of the mind. And this is the really cute play on words, but just to say that the other person, when you see someone, the other, I'm seeing you as a person, you're hearing me, you are listening to Brooks, and you think Brooks as another person, but Brooks, or your neighbor, or the guy next to you, or the woman you see on the train, or whatever it is. These are projections of the self through the inversions of the mind. The toi has no more reality than the moi, except as a pure modification of the soi, the self. This is the interplay. Intersubjectivity between people is about modifications of that single self, right? So if the ego is illusory, which he is very much arguing throughout all of his works, Klossowski's running with, then the other as ego would also be equally phantasmatic. Get used to the wording. We're going to be seeing it a lot. But if my ego is a phantasm, if I am a phantasm, if I am this thing that's created and it's not illusory, but it's phantasmatic, then so are you when I talk to you. Now, you exist. The toi has no more reality than moi, except as a modification of soi. That's it sounds so much better in French, or reads so much better in French at least. But that's the whole point, is that this is the stable individual critique that people put on themselves. They then bear guilt themselves and then pass that on as modifications intersubjectively to someone else. And this all maintains itself within its own cohesive structure, as Nietzsche's going on about it. He says the self finally exists in the body only as prolonged extremity of chaos. Impulses take on an organic, individualized form only when delegated by chaos. This is, if there's a place where you're going to, I will say, take grain of salt. I ascribe to everything Klossowski's saying. I love this book. But this is where we start getting into a thing where these little nuances, this is Klossowski coming through more than Nietzsche at this point. And this is like the foundation of what Klossowski's doing here. Chaos, and I do not, someone will have to correct me, I do not believe Nietzsche directly says these statements in this way, but Klossowski very much does. Chaos is the pre-individual source from which the self emerges. And it does so as kind of this temporary delegation. Okay? The self exists in the body only as a prolonged extremity of chaos. And he refines it by saying, impulses take on an organic and individualized form only when delegated by chaos. Chaos at the center of this. Chaos and self, the self, that greedy self that's often mistranslated as egoism, has a temporary self-organization. It is not an autonomous entity. If individual identity is illusory, right, is phantasmatic, right? That means others are phantasmatic as well. But also what remains of and in this chaotic flux of forces, the chaotic flux is all that remains. If the self is illusory, the flux is the deal. This is the center of it, the underlying thing, the forces underlying all apparent stability. That setup there is kind of, the delegation happens. It was this delegation. The delegation is the thing, which is, again, means that delegation, I'm choosing a representative. I'm delegating to you. You're going to be temporarily doing this. You're setting it up for me. This is being passed on from you. The body remains in chaos. The body is in chaos. The body stays in chaos, but delegates to this ego, this individual identity, this phantasmatic thing. Multiplicity of forces would be more Nietzschean. Yeah, this is, because again, August, and I'd love your thoughts on this, or anyone else really, because this is where we start getting into what I think is some of the really interesting, it's a minor thing, but when we talk about the multiplicity of forces, it tends to imply, and a lot of readings, my previous reading of Nietzsche had this, that there is causative traits behind them, that like the multiplicity of forces aren't wholly chaotic as a thing, that there's just so many of them that it's impossible to determine beginning or end. It's impossible, but it does feel like when we say multiplicity of forces that the forces are there. But if we take it to the step of saying that these forces don't have beginning and end or real simple sort of causative chains, then multiplicity of forces are clearly chaotic. They're chaos. And the delegation of that from that chaos, or to say again, the impulses take on an organic and individualized form only when delegated by chaos. And that delegation from chaos is kind of to me, a pretty substantial shift that Klossowski's putting forward. Again, I'm not saying I disagree with it at all. I very much embrace it, but it is wild. Am I wrong on that, August? LJ, anyone?
In terms of the Selbstsucht, like the selfness, right? or the reading, or I don't know, like, does the impulses, like what is kind of like the I'm lost. What's kind of like the impulses, like,
Okay,
what's
let's
the
take a
place
step
of
back.
chaos?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
right now, as you're sitting there, your brain is trying to pay attention to me and listening to me, and it is deciding this is what you want. Your body, however, and when I say body, I mean everything from eyes to whatever it is. There are an almost infinite number of what I might say, I probably shouldn't, but I'll say like infinitely distracting impulses. A lot that you've learned to cover up over time. Children less so, and infants even less than that. The impulses of itchiness, achiness, slight weird feeling in your left thigh, whatever it is, these are the ones you're aware of. But again, you're listening to me, you're talking to me, you've said some stuff to me, you've decided the coalescing of all of those is in you saying this to me. The forces, the impulses are the multitude of them that exist within the totality of what you might say is the tyranny of your mind. As your mind is saying, I'm going to go walk over to the store and I like pizza. I have no idea, like whatever it might be. The bodily forces that are at war with each other or conflicting or in a million different directions are being covered up and minimized. Right now, for example, everyone has a nose in front of their face. Probably. I shouldn't be ableist. Maybe you don't, but probably have a nose in front of your face that you actually can see, but your mind over time has blurred it out. You can't smell yourself as a thing. People generally don't unless it's really horrifying. But your normative everything, that vibration of every part of your body and every sense organ interacting with each other, you've kind of learned to deal with it. Well, your brain has. But those impulses are still there, and they're actually still affecting you. You just don't notice them anymore. The way you get hungry is because that's not normative. You're not normally always hungry, if you're lucky, I guess I should say. My experience is I'm not always sitting here starving as a thing. But when I am hungry, that is a coalescing of forces, of impulses, that my mind has decided it understands. But there's shit happening with your stomach all day. Like, it's not like it just happens to start then. You just, when you're well, when you're healthy, that normative position means that the abnormal, oh, I can claim that for myself. Oh, that's hunger. Oh, that's thirst. Oh, that's dry mouth. Oh, that's tired. Oh, that's this. Oh, that's this. And you've claimed all of those things, even if they're not that. Even if they're not. People who have eating disorders, people who learned early on to emotionally associate food in various ways with care or other things. Their impulses are mixed in that way. And when you see them, you can't even understand. How do you associate pizza with love? What are you talking about? Well, the same way that you associate orgasm with love, or a rubbing on your back in the right way, or someone putting their warm hand on your forehead. These collective impulses that you've assigned the name to, that your mind takes over, claims, and then flattens everything else is, I mean, this is core Nietzsche. This is what Nietzsche says effectively is you. The question is, and this is where Klossowski's going, those impulses, we could be biological essentialists with it, which is not far probably from my previous position, even though I don't want to admit that. But like August says, how often do you feel and hear the pulse of your heart beating? And when you do, it feels like it's in your throat, and this or that, all of these things that you've sort of named and said over time that are you. All of those things, are they caused by things that are very clear? Even though there's a multitude of them. Do they have like minor causation at every step? Or is it just fairer to say it is the chaos? yeah, August, I'm with you. I tend to think of the forces as having a small amount of internal logic. I'm not sure pure chaos, if I'm understanding what is being said, is justified. Now, the forces arising from a chaos, you could work with that. Now, this is where, again, the important part for Klossowski is, and it's a fine line, because we may consider that they have some internal logic, these forces, these impulses. Klossowski's first question, and we're going to be coming to it, don't worry. His first question is going to be, why do you believe that? And it's a fair question. Because if there's reason for all of it, it kind of is a problematic thing on its own for a whole bunch of reasons. So this is the point underneath it. This is this dramatic ending. It was this delegation that now became Nietzsche's interlocutor. From high in the cerebral citadel besieged, it is called madness. This is the brain as the fortress under siege by the forces it's trying to control. For Nietzsche, it's fair to talk about this way. If you aren't aware, Nietzsche ended up snapping, and it basically ended. That was it. That was all the Nietzsche we got after that sort of that snap. Because it was part of his philosophical project. His illness was part of it. And madness for him is almost not failure. It's not failure. It's almost a success of sorts. The madness of the dissolution of the ego, the replacement of it by direct expressions of these chaotic forces. The mature Nietzsche philosophy, the stuff that happens post his early break. And again, there's early, late, there's a whole bunch of different Nietzsches in here. But that early stuff, very different. The later stuff, the mature stuff, for Klossowski is chaos speaking through Nietzsche. And Nietzsche speaks of it this way. It's not a rational discourse about chaos that he's having. It's chaos speaking through him. This is Klossowski's push for us to understand, is that it's not Nietzsche taming these forces, but the forces speaking through Nietzsche. And we'll get to, when we get to his final breakdown, which is coming, you'll kind of see that Klossowski and how he talks about it, how he analyzes it, is not a catastrophe, but instead an achievement, which is, yes, it's going to be that kind of thing. It's going to be that kind of thing. I'm waiting for, I guess, I think they would acquire the logic through individuation from chaos, but that's an easy answer. Well, this is where we start talking about the difference between I don't even know if it's a difference. This is a reading of Nietzsche that I think is incredibly important to consider on its own and to be considering as it goes. We're about to read a whole lot of Nietzsche, just so you know. And it's going to be a lot to sort of go through, because this is basically going to be where Klossowski goes, here you go. Here's my point. So it's going to be a lot, but it's Nietzsche's life doesn't have a sad ending. It completely fucks up the movie Turin Horse, by the way. Sorry, that's a really, really weird nerd joke. Any questions, comments, anything else? Because I'm going to kind of just jump ahead and all of this is just Nietzsche, and this is from a whole bunch of different stuff. Let me read Klossowski's paragraph, then we'll pause, and we'll talk a bit before, and then we'll start getting through the Nietzsche stuff. Once the body is recognized as the product of the impulses, subjected, organized, hierarchized, its cohesion with the self becomes fortuitous. The impulses can be put to use by a new body and are presupposed in the search for new conditions. Starting from these impulses, Nietzsche suspected that beyond the cerebral intellect, there lies an intellect that is infinitely more vast than the one that merges with our consciousness. We're about to read a whole bunch of stuff that is Klossowski very much hammering this home. The thing to be doing as we go through this is to be watching for how Nietzsche is talking about the forces, the impulses, and their relation to the intellectual, what you would call a more abstract brain, mind thinking, and then body thought. Just, these are all really wonderful ways that Nietzsche wrote about this. Just be ready. It is not a small amount, to say the least. All of this is going to be Nietzsche. This is just so much. I believe a lot of this is from Beyond Good and Evil, but there's gay science and genealogy and morals in here. There's a few different footnotes. And I'm not super in the mood to break out what each one is. I'm pretty sure there's Zarathustra's in here. It's a whole thing. But let's do it. Perhaps the entire evolution of the spirit is a question of the body. It is the history of the development of a higher body that emerges into our sensibility. The organic is rising to yet higher levels. Our lust for knowledge of nature is a means through which the body desires to perfect itself, or rather, hundreds of thousands of experiments are made to change the nourishment, the mode of living, and the dwelling of the body. Consciousness and evaluations of the body, all kinds of pleasure and displeasure are signs of these changes and experiments. In the long run, it is not a question of man at all. He is to be overcome. It's really great phrasing. I like it. This is where the Übermensch writing really comes from, the idea of the Übermensch. The human is transitional. It is not final. This is the line he has, the man is to be overcome. Man is to be overcome. The overman, the Übermensch. This is the idea of a bodily evolutionary process, but not Darwinian or base scientific. It is not a moral or spiritual thing for us to find ourselves elevated to, but that in the long run, there is a temporal scale that exceeds any individual existence and maybe any individual understanding, where man overcomes cosmic processes in this way. This is basically beginning of humanization, like the post-human as a thing. August says, worth noting the brain is part of bodily thinking as well. Yes, this is true. The brain and the mind are part of it. It's conscious versus unconscious, or psycho versus somatic. The kind of the two sides of that. But yeah, it's. I think it's a really beautiful paragraph. As a thing. Sorry if I pause before every one of these, because I am moved by Nietzsche. So you just get to fucking deal with that. You just get to deal with it. Clear out the inner world. There are still many false beings in it. Sensation and thought are enough for me. The will as a third reality is imaginary. Moreover, all the impulses, desire, repulsion, etc. are not unities, but apparent simple states. Hunger. It is a feeling of discomfort, a knowledge of the means to suppress it. Similarly, without any knowledge, a series of movements can take place in the organism whose aim is to suppress hunger. The stimulation of this mechanism is felt at the same time as the hunger. Hey, there you go. See, someone asked earlier, what's the difference between, what do you mean by impulses? That would be it. There is Hey, boy, I'm hungry. No, you're not. That is the knowledge, the discomfort you have existing alongside the knowledge and the knowledge of ways to suppress that discomfort. If your foot is sitting somewhere badly and it's bent wrong and it's uncomfortable, that's because you are not only just aware of that, but you're also aware that it can be fixed. That is why it's uncomfortable and not terrifying. This is that, the hunger as a thing. But also, without any knowledge, a series of movements can take place in the organism whose aim is to suppress hunger. The stimulation of this mechanism is felt at the same time as hunger. Fuck, it's so good. Sorry, it's just so fucking good. Nietzsche, when he goes, is great. Nietzsche's great. I think is this Human, All Too Human, or is this Daybreak? I can never remember. Doesn't matter. Still good. Just as organs develop in multiple ways from a single organ, such as the brain and the nervous system from the epidermis, so it was necessary for all feeling, representing, and thinking to have been one at the beginning. Sensation is thus an isolated, late phenomena. This unity must exist in the inorganic, for the organic begins by separation. The reciprocal action between the inorganic and the organic still needs to be studied. It is always a question of an action at a distance in the long term. Hence, a knowing is necessary prior to all acting. What is distant must be perceived. The tactile and muscular sense must have its analog. This is a gauntlet thrown down that Deleuze and Guattari very much pick up as I read it again. But this is huge as dealing with the nature of the inorganic. The idea that knowing actually precedes life is crazy. As he's laying out, like logically, if organic differentiation begins in inorganic unity, which I think we can kind of argue pretty easily, well then some form of sentience must exist in inorganic matter to make organic development possible at all. As a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a statement. Again, August, are you seeing why Klossowski is touching into chaos? Like there's a lot of very particular language here that he's pulling. But anyway, I love you, Quat. The tactile and muscular sense must have its analog in inorganic elements, is kind of a very gigantic statement. It's a very gigantic statement. And it's worth sort of, again, putting a pin in. Klossowski's coming. We're going to come back to all of this, but this is laying the groundwork nicely. Consciousness localized at the surface of the two hemispheres. Every experience is a mechanical and chemical fact that cannot be stopped, but which lives, except that we know nothing of it. Good Nietzsche is good Nietzsche. Wherever there is life, we assume there is mind, but the mind as we know it is completely incapable of effectuating anything whatsoever. How miserable is every image of consciousness! No doubt it itself will merely be the effect of a modification, which then brings about another modification. Every action we will is simply represented by us as the appearance of the phenomena. All consciousness is nothing but a marginal expression of the intellect. What becomes conscious in us cannot reveal the cause of anything. We should compare our digestion with our sensations of it. This is for Nietzsche, he means this quite literally. Our sensations of it versus our digestion is very much the way that thought, like this is thought. He's talking about thought here and will and all of this stuff at once. He's mocking the intellect as its own unique category because what's with the exclamation point in parentheses? Let me check the original French one moment. I think it's in the original that he put that there as like a, ooh, but I'm not sure. I think that's because I think this is a direct quote, but I'm not sure. One sec. Did Dan change it? Want to note the change? I don't think Dan changed it. I don't think Klossowski changed it either. Actually, I think it's in the original German.
Schein der Erscheinung. The appearance of phenomena. Schein. Schein, which means appearance, I think. Schein.
The exclamation point is in the original for Klossowski, and I'm not. All right, let me go find out what 51 is. 1 second. My money is it's in the original. Would be my bet. 2 seconds, sorry. Yeah, it looks like it's not in my. Oh God, I hate Nietzschean translations so much. Nietzsche's translations are generally so very lacking. I'll have to pull up like 9 of them. That'll just take too long. I think it's in the original. If I had to guess, it's in the original. The point is the inversion. I think August he's driving attention to the fact that there's an inversion here. And I mean Nietzsche, not Klossowski. It's possible Klossowski added it, but I don't know. But
I'll track it down in a little bit. What's the note, or where is it supposed to be from?
I don't know. 1 second.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm scrolling down and I'm trying to find it. And then I'm dreading as I do that. 1 sec. All right, 51. Oh my God. Oh fuck. He's using a particular oh my God. 1 second. Okay. So, oh, Jesus Christ. Klossowski. Klossowski is using the 15-volume German original translation of Nietzsche, which is not great for sourcing.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It's beautiful set though, Jesus. But yeah, this is not going to be fun. So let's see. So 51 in chapter 2 is 406. It's from summer of 1883. 406 to 7. Okay. I will have to download and pirate this. Thank you very much, Internet. You fucking... Isn't it great? Piracy's made a huge fucking return. Has anyone else noticed that? Like, it's fucking insane. Like, the Internet's huge again. Like, piracy is a huge thing again. Okay, come on. There it is. 15 Banden. 15 Banden? Band 12, Band 13. Oh, for fuck's sake. You have to download them separately. Nietzsche's sämtliche Werke, Christik Studiengaben. Oh. Yeah, so I don't have this version, and I don't have the 15-volume set, and I don't have and I don't speak German.
That's okay. I'll track it down later, and if I have any notes, I'll let you know. It's probably not the biggest deal, but punctuation has become a thing, especially Kaufman's translation. You know, he messes with all the punctuation. So
I have no doubt. So let's see if it's spring 1883, summer 1883, volume 10. Let me see if I can just get volume 10. Bond 10. Let me see if I can just do bond, because I think band is volume. Oh, wait. That's bond 13. Bond 10. Shit. I hate this so much. Friedrich Nietzsche, Samtliche Werke. If anyone can find, I'm gonna ask for this in the QC, but I'm putting it in the chat. If anyone can find this, feel free. I'm gonna put it in the QC. We have a lovely section called "I Need Texts."
I think this is the Nietzsche source. I think you can just find it. I'll look for it. I think it's Nietzsche's source. Giorgio Colli and Mazzino. I think that's Nietzsche's source.
I think so too. I found band 10. So let's see if I can download this. It worked. Let me see if it's the right one.
That's basically become the German scholarly standard, from my understanding.
Oh, that's excellent. None of that helps me in any capacity, but it's very good to know a thing. Volume 10, page 406. Come on, open. Page 406.
It's what the Stanford extended notes and stuff are based off of as well.
Well, that's good to know. 406. And the second part of that was 1233. And there's 12. $31.33. Well, I'm not going to try to read this out loud, but I'm going to post it into the Discord. I did find it, so that's at least something, I guess. It's a feather in my cap. If anyone speaks German, there's that. And then, you know who does speak German is Google Translate, my friend. He does a very good job, generally speaking. Consciousness is localized. Consciousness is localized on the surface of both hemispheres. Every experience we have is a mechanical and chemical fact that cannot remain still but is alive. We only know nothing of it. Okay. This is... Consciousness is localized. So Klossowski is doing his own translation here. Because this is not what is in French at all. Wait, no. Wait. Is this... Well, that can't be right. Wait, what number was that? Because that's 50. I just read 50. That's not right. 51 is 33, 34. Okay, so what's 34? There we go. Oh. Okay. Well, this is not going to be fun as a conversation. Does anyone here really know ancient German? Like, I don't. Okay. All consciousness is merely a secondary expression of the intellect. I found it. Marginal expression. That's fine. Secondary expression of the intellect. Question mark in parentheses. Which I think is ultimately serves the same purpose. The point would be drawing attention to it. This is the actual here. Interesting. There, that second one is it. It has the question mark in parentheses, not an exclamation point, but I think it is for the same purpose. It's interesting that it was translated that way, though. Posting it into YouTube chat as well, in case anyone there is German. Because the question mark is actually, it's a really nice translation, to be frank. Really nice, crisp. All consciousness is merely second expression of intellect. That's It's kind of as I take the question mark or exclamation point in this case. What becomes conscious, what we become conscious of cannot be the cause of anything. Just compare digestion and what we perceive of it. Yeah, I read that that's just straight. Well, so it is in the original. There is something there. What the point of the question mark is, I think, is the same as the exclamation point. It's to draw to the question. All consciousness is nothing but a marginal expression of intellect. That's what it's meant to be, a thing on the side of that as I read it. Is that fair? Anyone? No?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
The switch from question mark to exclamation point, though, the etymology of that I want to know so much right now. And that's just the most useless information I could possibly have in my head. But it is intriguing to me, like that I'm not sure and that might matter less than anything that's ever mattered. It might be more important to know the winners of Love Island or some shit like that. That's a reality show that I'm aware of tangentially. Well, now I have a download of that book, so that'll be good for when we get to the next bits of this, I guess. Okay, let's get back up. Boop, 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 boop. All right. Off we go, in theory. Unless anyone has a question or a thing at this point. Which I'm happy to. I should wait for a second because I just went on a weird tangent. Man, this reading is a fucking lot sometimes. All right. Our intellect. Our intellect is completely incapable of grasping the diversity of an intelligent synthetic interaction, not to mention producing one, like the digestive process. It is the synthetic interaction of several intellects. Wherever I find life, I find this synthetic interaction. There is also a sovereign in these numerous intellects, but as soon as we seek to comprehend organic actions, But as soon as we seek to comprehend organic actions that would be executed with the assistance of several intellects, they become completely incomprehensible. We should rather conceive of the intellect itself as a final consequence of the organic. If you want a really good read ever on the body without organs, Dan Smith has a lovely one that is basically this paragraph. Nah, it shouldn't mix readings, but it's hard not to. It's really hard not to sometimes. This is overall this is Nietzsche talking about the nature of how we have our intellect that actually is missing on a lot of other intellects. He mentions the digestive process as one. You're not aware of it. You don't cognize it, nor do you command it. You know this. You can't, like, yes, August, you're now digesting manually. You're not able to digest manually. Like, try to hold a thing back. Control your intestines. Like, the closest you get is not shitting your pants for a while. Not pissing your pants for a while. At some point you don't have control over these things. That control is a bit of an illusion here. And as he says, God, I don't know why I'm yawning so much. But as soon as we seek to comprehend organic actions that would be executed with the assistance of several intellects, they become incomprehensible. This is the nature of this thing, or it's a distributed intelligence, digestion, your limbic system, your muscular system. One of the hardest things, and it's there are video games that joke about this, like QWOP, or Baby Steps just came out, which is great. which is making fun of the idea of how hard it is to consciously do things that we take for granted. The game baby steps, you pull the right trigger, makes your leg extend or crush, like your knee, like you contract your muscles in your right leg, and then your left leg, and you lean forward and back. That's the entire control scheme. And it's almost impossible to just like walk quickly, let alone run. It's incredibly difficult. And again, that type of intellect, that type of intelligence, that type of setup, we completely lose our sense of. We completely lose our sense of it. And that last bit, we should rather conceive of the intellect itself as a final consequence of the organic. There is so much insane shit going on inside of our bodies and inside of all of the stuff. This is another one of Nietzsche's big pushes. And this is, again, there's a reason Klossowski has all of these quotes in the order that he does and in the placement. That all of this is about this crazy inversion. Instead of talking about organic life that comes from or is explained by the intellect, it's actually something that emerges as a consequence of organic development itself, almost out of necessity. The idea then that consciousness is sort of natural and within evolutionary development works. But we also don't need to have it as an explanatory system either. Intellect in this case becomes this sort of odd specialization that we have that simply forgot that it's part of this system and that exists because of this system or by necessity of the system rather than a magic happenstance that God gave us, for example, which even Dawkins and others seem to mistake it for. And so when you start talking about cognition and these other things, this was at the time exceptionally revolutionary. But, I think it's pretty great these days even. The essence of heredity is totally obscure to us. Why does an action become easier the second time around? Who experiences that it made easier? And does this sensation have anything in common with the fact that the action is effectuated in the same manner the second time? Would the sensation of different possible actions then have to be represented before acting? That the second sentence here. So the first one is, all of this is so fucking good. How is it that muscle memory exists? Like we talk about it and it's such a given. Hey, practice makes perfect. Just do a thing, do it a second time, and you'll get better at it over time. How the fuck? How does heredity work? Why does an action become easier the second time around? We feel it easier. The first time we're confused and lost. But is it that we're that? What if the experience isn't actually corresponding to an actual process of it being easier? Right? What if it's actually complex reorganizations around the way that things come to pass, around the way that this thing works, where we first start with all of the intellects trying to work together because they don't know quite how to do the thing towards the goal. But as we start doing it, we actually start moving in a different place where we end up giving, as things start learning their place in order to make a sandwich, in order to type some things. The first time we type a letter, it's incredibly taxing on every part of our multiple intellects until we get to the point where we go, oh, I'm just typing. And if you're like me, you type too fast and you fuck it up the other side. So that's the thing. Who experiences that is made easier? Like who learns? Like really, if the action is easier through organic modification, we call it muscle memory, but that's how we talk about it. Like it's a bodily thing. And then that's just it. It's muscle memory. Just got to do it over and over. But what entity experiences that? What is that thing that's doing it? What if the experience of easier is actually a post hoc construction that your intellect does instead of a direct awareness of any learning process? just as a thing? What if you can't know kung fu like that? What experiences, what does these things, how do these things work? This is, again, the impulses underneath it, the mistake of that for the tyrannical consciousness that sort of is taking over, the ego that controls that. The powerful organic principle seems essential to me because of the ease by which it incorporates inorganic substances. I do not see how this finality could be explained simply by intensification. I believe rather that there are eternally organic beings. Such a fucking statement. What is this one from? This has to be from, what the fuck is this from? August? It's from 54. Let me go over. It's just wild. I'm not looking it up. I'm not in the mood. I can't look at German that long. It makes my brain die. But this is it. Think of it this way. You're an organic being. There is no part of you that is organic, though. Like the organism, the organized, the organic in principle is made of the inorganic and incorporates the inorganic. How the powerful principle seems essential to me because of the ease by which it incorporates inorganic. It just does. It just works completely in there. If you get your YouTube stuff set up, you're good. Don't worry about it. That's it. This is like the mystery of life. Like we transform inorganic matter into living processes. You take vitamins, you eat food, you breathe in air, all of these things. None of them are organic, but this organic principle that life as this active force exists rather than as an emergent property. That's the organic principle. The ease, and he says ease, the ease by which it incorporates organic substances. Life doesn't struggle to incorporate them. It's fairly effortless and seems effortless. I don't see it. There's not a lot of effort that goes into the process. More or less, it's just that's how I would read it. But that last line is a lot. That last line's a lot. And this is the subject. It's a completely different way of even conceiving of the subject or subjectivity or anything. And this is one of those things that's going to be touching into Deleuze later. For those of you who are getting into or like Deleuze, I see a lot of that in here. Simondon, obviously, Bergson, Bataille, everyone. But there's this really interesting thing that he's talking about here of these eternally organic beings, that they're not temporal emergences from inorganic matter, but instead, actually, they are a fundamental feature of reality. That, is he saying that we are organic beings that are built in imaginary identity? I don't want to say yes or no to that, but it's a completely different way of considering it. So like, okay, normal evolutionary theory is the idea that life comes from, at some point, even though we don't fully understand it, we're working on it, life comes from non-life. But what if actually organic principles as we understand them aren't emergent or coming from, but instead are themselves ontologically primitive? What if it's just, these are the things that stuff is made of? And this is, again, the will to power as base layer. What is the fundamental reality of things? Well, the organic is actually the fundamental to him instead of the inorganic. It's a panvitalism is another word for it.
In such a way that
just go for it.
Yeah, in such a way that the inorganic comes and emerge to be organic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or vice versa, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot here. Like there's a lot here you can be taking, but it eliminates and sidesteps. And that's, again, the thing I like about Nietzsche, the thing I like about Deleuze, is it sidesteps one of the traditional questions, which seem to stymie philosophy because they don't stand outside of themselves. They don't critique themselves. Organelles, exactly. This is something that avoids the implicit teleology in both religious and scientific thinking. It's a great way to put it, because that is what he's playing with. And he's not like giving an answer to this. You could say this is Panvitalism. I read it as that all matter has this sort of the logic of the organic, or the principle of organic inside of it, that manifests in certain conditions. That this is a way things organize. You could, and we're going to be going down there, and I think it's an even better way, but that organic beings have always existed. And that's some people take this, the eternal return, to mean this, that because of that, there's the organic has always existed and will always exist within the cyclic side of things. It could also mean that there's like a cosmological way that the universe itself is itself organic rather than mechanical. There's a lot of different ways to read this, and there's a lot of different ways people have read this. The point is, for right now, is because this is, for me, it's Elan Vital. This is a creative evolution from Bergson for me. Like, this is very much in that direction. But the whole point is Nietzsche in this phase of his writing, and we're almost done. There's still a couple more. We're going to be getting through some more Nietzsche quotes, and they're all profound things to me, or at least profound statements. Certainly profound statements. Certainly profound statements. But the entire thing is about this, again, broader project of moving away from this mechanistic naturalism, and that life as we understand it, or this emergent thing, this organic principle, is actually part and parcel of the ontological nature of things, which is a lot. This is also a thing Nick Land rejects. There's so much. I actually, he probably accepts and rejects it. It depends on what side of the meth pipe you catch him on. He has very bad readings of philosophers. Here is our way of being unequal. Your mind is devoid of a self, whereas mine has a complete self and is a mind only in word. This is how I once spoke. Meaning and the mind are tools and toys. Behind them still lies the self. But when I looked for a self behind these other minds, all I found were minds devoid of a self. Going all Zen Cohen on me. Listen to me a moment, O Zarathustra, a disciple said to him one day. Something is turning around in my head, or rather, I would be prepared to believe that my head is turning around something, and thus that it describes a circle. What then is our neighbor? Something within us, some modification of ourselves that have become conscious in image. This is what our neighbor is. But what are we ourselves? Are we not also nothing but an image, a something within us, modifications of ourselves that have become conscious? Our self of which we are conscious, is it not an image as well? Something outside of us, something external on the outside? We never touch anything but an image, and not ourselves, not our self. Are we not strangers to ourselves, and also as close to ourselves as our neighbor? In truth, we have an image of humanity, which we have made out of ourselves. And then we apply it to ourselves in order to understand ourselves. Yes, to understand. Our understanding of ourselves goes from bad to worse. Our strongest feelings, inasmuch as they are feelings, are only something external, outside us, imagistic. Similitudes, that's what they are. And what we habitually call the inner world, alas, for the most part, it is poor and deceptive and invented and hollow. Damn, he's such a good fucking writer. Now back to Klossowski. Okay. I'm not going to explain Zarathustra. I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that. It's such a good read. So it's my first time in this circle. Ha! Yorchi. We are chapter 2. We're only on page 36. The origin of... it might be chapter 1. Is it Origin of Semiotic Impulses, chapter 1? Or did we make it 2? I think we made it...
chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Yeah, Origin of Semiotic Impulses. Bottom of 36. Mostly at this point where he's laying the foundation. Chapter 3 is where this shit really begins. So if you're just joining now, it's perfectly fine. This is all just building up, and you can kind of catch up by going back anytime you want. It's not a big deal. All right. Whew. Let's do it. Because this is, if you can't tell, this next paragraph, this is a lot. This is a lot coming up here. God. Oh my God. This is a 3-page paragraph. Excellent. The best kind of paragraph. All right. Let us take at their word Nietzsche's physiological ideas concerning the relationship between thought and willing on the formation of meaning in a given declaration. Moreover, let us try to understand how, given his notion that conscious life is subordinated to fluctuations of intensities, he maintains what we call an intention and a goal at the level of consciousness, and what this latter term signifies in relation to the term unconscious. What do these terms refer to in Nietzsche? Are they different from the terms conscious and unconscious in Freud's sense of the iceberg? For it would seem that neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, nor willing or non-willing, have ever existed. Within a system of designating fluctuations, there is only a discontinuity between silence and declarations in the agent, inasmuch as exteriority is installed in the agent by the code of everyday signs. It is only on the basis of this code that the agent can make declarations or state opinions, think or not think, remain silent or break its silence. The agent thinks only as a product of this code. Now, such a thinking agent exists only because of the greater or lesser resistance of the impulsive forces, which constitutes the agent as a corporeal unity with respect to the code of everyday signs. By what measure can we say that the agent is conscious, of not speaking, of remaining silent, of acting or not acting, of deciding or remaining undecided? Only in terms of a more or less unequal exchange between the impulses and the signs of everyday code. What the fuck, Brooks? God damn. But it is not the agent, unconscious of what these unconscious of what these impulses are willing for themselves? Hence the inequality of the exchange, and the fact that the impulses lose out in the transaction. An intention is formed through the signs, minus their impulsive intensity. The intensity oscillates while thought as such is being formed, but once the declaration is produced, it is reduced to the inertia of signs. Where then does the ebbing flow of the intensity go? It overflows the fixity of signs and continues on, as it were, in their intervals. Each interval, thus each silence, thus each silent belongs outside the linkage of signs, to the fluctuations of an impulsive intensity. Is this the unconscious? In itself, this term is merely a designation of the code of everyday signs that is applied afterwards. What then is it that requires even the most lucid agent to remain unconscious of what is going on within itself? Nietzsche knows, for example, as he writes his notes on the impulses, that such impulses are acting in him, but that there is no accord between the observations he is transcribing and the impulses that have compelled him to write them. But if he is conscious of what he is writing as the agent named Nietzsche, it is because he knows not only that he is ignorant of what has just occurred in order for him to write, but also that he must be ignorant of it if he wants to write and think. At that very moment, he is necessarily ignorant of what he is about to call the combat of the impulses among themselves. Even if he stops writing, even if he tries to stop thinking, could we say that he is therefore abandoning himself to the unconscious in the form of an extravagant reverie? Told you, there's a lot going on. Whew. I'm going to talk about evolution. Could be wrong here, but a lot of people say it's the strongest that survived, but the dinosaurs were stronger. It's a question that the whole point of this at this point, and this entire section we're reading now, and this paragraph is so fucking long. The point is talking through, what does it mean that we have intention? What does it mean that we have goals? What does it mean that we have an unconscious? How do we consider these things? And I think the stunning part for me reading this is, even I've spent a great deal of time reading a lot of thinkers who play in this, but the way Klossowski is rewording it and stating it separates the unconscious in a very specific way that I think is extremely eloquent. And again, for Nietzsche, incredibly important to his project. So we'll actually go through this. So again, this opening here, real simple. This is Klossowski again restating his interpretive method, which is a thing to remember as you make your way through this. This is not a bland reading of Nietzsche. This is not a literary, direct reading of Nietzsche. It is a particular type of interpretation. And that interpretation is one where we treat the physiological psychology as a system rather than a metaphorical speculation on Nietzsche's part. Take them at their word. This is very serious for Klossowski as we make our way through here. This is taking them at their word. Taking the elements at their word is a big deal, right? Thought and willing are physiological processes. These aren't spiritual interpretations, and as such, we work with them and on the formation of meaning in a given declaration. Treat speech acts as products of those physiological forces rather than a conscious intention. It's a kind of a fantastic way to state it, and really interesting in and of itself. A lot. By the way, in this paragraph, if you're part of our anti-Oedipus reading groups, you will see so much. You will see so much. Or you should, at least, I think, is a fair statement. Because there's a lot happening here. Getting away from the symbolic unconscious. I mean, Jesus Christ, is it possible this book influenced anti-Oedipus at all? And Guattari and Deleuze? Like, it's crazy. Because this prefigured them. It's insane. The writing here is so crisp. Phil G says there's no survival goal in evolution. It's a broken way of thinking of adaptation and co-function between environments and organisms. It's not organism versus environment. It is one whole. It is. This is, you're kind of jumping ahead, Phil. But yes, that's kind of more or less Nietzsche's point, actually. There's some citations of anti-Oedipus in this book. Really?
Yes, the subject of enjoyment, when it talks about this circle and the that the machine is in the center, it cites Klossowski. I think so. It's in the third chapter in the first part.
Oh, you're talking about in Anti-Oedipus of this book. Sorry, I read it backwards. I'm dumb. Jesus Christ. I was like, like, wait, this came before what? No. In AO, they reference it. Yes. Yeah. But it's one of those things. There's a handful of, and the running joke in the QC we use is that Deleuze did people dirty because it sounds good and it's alliterative, but it's like people like Klossowski who get mentioned, but not really for this. Like the level of how important they are. Rière, Simondon, it's crazy the number of people that like are absolutely formative. But this is like, this paragraph is basically saying, hey, here's chapter 2 and 4 of Anti-Oedipus, and like just really nicely said and crisp. It's something. But yeah, very much. They do. And Deleuze, and Klossowski both dedicated writing to each other. They were incredibly close friends, actually. Not as close as he and Guattari later, but very, very close. Does Deleuze theories help me in real life? Yes, it does. No, Phil, you're good. I'm joking when I say you're jumping ahead. I'm just giving you shit. It's fine. It's fine. Jumping ahead's perfectly fine here. Because that's kind of the idea a little bit. So, moreover, let us try to understand how, given his notion that conscious life is subordinated to the fluctuations of intensities, he explains what we call an intention and a goal at the level of consciousness. So, this is, again, playing with how Nietzsche works with paradoxes. If consciousness is necessarily, right, as we talk about, consciousness is subordinate to unconscious intensities, well, then how do we have conscious intentions? How do these happen? Well, the fluctuation of intensities here. This is the forces, the play of forces beneath awareness, beneath cognition, flux of things, you might say, and subordinated. They're like, this is the phrasing they're talking about. What we call an intention and a goal at the level of consciousness. How do these things come to be? How do these things come to happen? I'll make sure Phil's message is pinned so everyone can see it. So you should switch to live chat. YouTube's top chat is so shit for us because people say things that are long and complicated and it filters those out. And it's like, that's usually the best stuff. Fucking YouTube. But the question is, what do these terms refer to in Nietzsche? Are they different from the terms conscious and unconscious, say in Freud's sense of the iceberg model, which is the metaphor Freud and others use for the unconscious? If you don't know, when you see an iceberg, it's a nice little cute little top, little ice mountain, but underneath there is insane amounts of, because obviously it's not top heavy, it's fucking insane amount of ice underneath the water. So the iceberg model is that consciousness is this little bit and this massive amount underneath, right? This hidden amount that we can get to if we can just figure stuff out. If we can just understand it, we can understand that it's there. For Nietzsche, it's a little bit different. Consciousness and the unconscious, unconscious. I need to learn to say that differently. Consciousness and unconsciousness are actually different modes of intensity. I'll read through that in a second, but they're different modes of intensity. It's not really different containers of content or different categories of content, like the conscious or unconscious as we tend to think of them. So they're fundamentally different than what Freud's talking about. Freud, it's regions of consciousness. There is the conscious and the unconscious are these two regions. For Nietzsche, they're different intensities of the same forces. They play slightly different. And this is, again, this is where Klossowski is really going to start coming into all of this. For it would seem that neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, nor willing nor non-willing, have ever existed. Now Klossowski is doing radical shit with fucking Nietzsche. The traditional categories of will or non-willing, or consciousness or unconsciousness, he's dissolving them entirely. Again, this does come from and carries forward from Nietzsche's critique of the selfhood that we just went through. Sure. But the setup there is basically, and he's playing with them as pairs that are sort of grammatically linked, like he's doing this, but he's about to make a very large statement where he says, within a system of designating fluctuations, there is only a discontinuity between silence and declarations in the agent. This is a lot. If by the end of this, you don't understand why this sentence is a lot, the end of this paragraph, not the end of this book, the end of this paragraph, please let me know, because this is kind of a huge fucking deal. It is not about, as the previous sentence says, this is not about consciousness or unconsciousness. This isn't about willing or not willing. That shit never existed. Within a system of designating fluctuations, there is only discontinuity between silence and declarations. These are observable phenomena rather than hypothetical, abstracted, secondary mental states that we actually can't really notice any difference between. What we call the mental life of people, what we experience as mental life, is actually a semiotic system for registering changes of intensity. Okay? Discontinuity means that there's no smooth transition between any of these states of intensity. It is abrupt shifts between silence and speech. The subject is not a substantial entity. We are internally a discontinuous series of semiotic events. That is our mental space. The designating is being done by the fluctuations themselves. No. Yes. Like this is, the challenge is going to be questions like that don't really work because, and I'm not saying that in like a really negative critical way, but it's important. There is not a themselves. Like the subject and all of that sets up that exists, the subject that thinks is actually semiotic. And it's about, within a system of designating fluctuations, there is only discontinuity between silence and declarations in the agent. I'll continue for a couple little bits, but this is incredibly important. What are designations? Hunger, or I just said the word hunger, deciding to say the word hunger, that designated fluctuation, the semiotics of that, what we call them, and then it crushes them, and then it sets them up in order so that way action can be taken on behalf of them. And then that action, then as it's repeated, what is repeating that? Well, it's actually the same processes that is going through it and making it sort of more automatic or autonomic. The substantial entity here is the process, not the subject. And it's a process that is itself discontinuous. The sentence breaks my brain, and it's important. We're going to come back to it before the end of the paragraph a couple times. Because the next sentence, this agent thinks only as a product of this code. So thought or consideration or contemplation, all of these things, it is not a choice. You do not think because you've decided to think or that you think thinking is good. The subject of thought is produced by this signification system, the semiotic system. And it's produced by this sign system it believes itself to use. Okay? So the agent is effect. It is not cause. The code of everyday signs, the social linguistic system that structures communication, that's this code that produces the agent that thinks itself. It's a little hard to follow. This is probably the most succinct way I've ever heard anyone describe chapter 1 of Anti-Oedipus, because that's what this is. This is describing basically the three syntheses. That's what this is. This is the three syntheses for Anti-Oedipus. Things come together. Sensations are recorded over time as we have semiotic structuring and the structuration of things. At the end of that, when that gets complex enough, the agent, the subject, the person sort of falls back on it. The agent is a grammatical fiction generated by the linguistic system. It appears to use and manipulate to create other things, but it's actually not that. It's not that subjects use language. Language produces subjects. And language exists because the semiotic structure of things is actually from impulses that over time we've learned what they are or what they mean and how to fix them and what to do about them. And it's automatic, and it's a fairly basic internal experience. And that internal experience is that of the semiotic system. And the designating fluctuations that say, oh, this, I am hungry. When I say I am hungry, there's like thousands of things happening. But the designating fluctuations is not just that I am hungry. It's the designating of the I or my body and me. I don't say you're hungry. I say I am hungry because I'm designating these sensations, specifically those sensations, as mine. And within that, and as that happens, it is not about, as the previous sentence says, it is not about conscious or unconscious. It is not about multiple registers of existence. It's instead that there is silence or something, and declarations are that something. Inasmuch as exteriority is installed in the agent by the code of everyday signs, it is only on the basis of this code that the agent can make declarations or state opinions, think or not think, remain silent or break its silence. So exteriority is installed in the agent by the code of signs. I am hungry. Hungry. Easy. That tends to be a very personal thing. I might say you are hungry, but hungry is particular and creates particularities and arrangements of all of these impulses that we've learned over time. And that exteriority is installed in the agent by the code of everyday signs that are sort of swirling around in the way that we communicate and understand things. It is only on the basis of this code that the agent can make declarations or state opinions, think or not think, remain silent, or break its silent. That's the push.
It reminds me of the early, when he talked about the mute of culture, right? And we, in a set way, we forced to think things, as you said previously, you forced to think something. You're not like producing thought or your brain producing thought, right? But like I don't know. I didn't, focus on the third chapter in Anti-Oedipus, the synthesis, right?
First chapter.
The first chapter. Sorry, but what he talked about here is the kind of the culture and what Deleuze hinted at in, I guess in Nietzsche, Deleuze and Nietzsche, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially before the chapter on resentment, when he hinted at kind of like the idea of culture and the mute of culture and these kind of things, right? And what he described, as I am understanding, what he described is the production of culture as such, or the codification of culture. That's kind of what ring a bell to me, in this section.
I find it fascinating. It's a really interesting set of wording on things. The agent thinks only as a product of this code. Thought is not voluntary, it is not involuntary, it is produced. It is produced as part of this. And the agent that is produced thinks only as a product of such code, which basically limits a great deal of thought to things. But even more so, now, such a thinking agent exists only because of the greater or lesser resistance of the impulsive forces, which constitute the agent as a corporeal unity with respect to the code of everyday signs. It's fucking great. The impulsive forces, which may be all of them, greater or lesser extent, are resistive. Such a thinking agent exists only because of the greater or lesser resistance of the impulsive forces, which constitutes the agent as a corporeal unity, bodily unity, totality of organism with respect to the code of everyday signs. By what measure can we say that the agent is conscious of not speaking, of remaining silent, of acting or not acting, of deciding or remaining undecided? It's a hell of a statement from Klossowski.
When you make a problem with someone, right, or someone acquainted with you, right, or someone like a friend or something like that, when you kind of grapple with him, you swear at him, you're in a bar or whatever, pick whatever place, right? You stay in a moment of silence, right? When this kind of grappling with thought, like you stay in a moment of silence, like out of kind of sheer anger. I don't know. Like,
well, you don't choose to stay silent, and often if you choose to stay silent, it's almost experienced as talking. It's enunciation without words, almost. Well, if you're choosing to, and so the way you're shocked into silence, or whatever, like that wording where it's like, again, you exist as the result of these forces, but it's not just as simple as, oh, I have impulses unconsciously. No. Your consciousness is produced inside of this and exists in these language. It isn't produced as a secondary thing and then it's built in this. This is like one of the hardest things to sort of wrap your head around when you read Simondon. And I think Simondon is, I wish he'd written more, and I wish more was translated into English. But the couple pieces we do have are magnificent. One of the hardest things for me personally was to begin to understand that Simondon at no point is talking about things that are sort of one producing the next, step producing the next. We tend to talk about this. It taught as a child that a caterpillar goes through a process and becomes a chrysalis, which becomes a butterfly. But that's not really the process, not really as the thing. But now that I have that imagery, now that I have that set up, the way that these things come together and the way that they're working, there really isn't a caterpillar there meaningfully, except as this sort of odd metastable collection of a whole bunch of different inorganic things that are working together. Like, it's a completely different understanding rather than understanding it's one thing becoming another. Because again, this is one of those things where is becoming at the center is one of the hardest parts. And we run into this a lot when people talk about stuff in the QC. They say things like, I'm becoming wolf because I'm like a wolf. No. You are not ever becoming. You are becoming. And it's a weird way that people tend to talk about it. It's like, oh, becoming, then I'm that thing. It's not really that at all. And with Nietzsche here, and Klossowski's taken it through Nietzsche, this isn't at any point that, oh, you're thinking and, oh, these impulses then create a thinking subject. No, the thinking subject is part of these impulses and created through the way that these things work together in these very particular setups and ways. In Anti-Oedipus, also the three syntheses work simultaneously too. Yes, they are immanent to each other and they are not to be considered separate. But goddamn, do we ever separate them? Because they kind of did too. So it kind of makes it tough to talk about. But yes, 100%, they are simultaneous and it's all at once. And, but also not all at once. Like it's that all at once almost becomes a category itself that doesn't really apply because things are always happening imminently like that. And the production of these things as they layer onto each other due to sort of a complexity and a coextensive sort of relation between these things. That's kind of the push. And this is the 2-hour mark. God damn, it is the 2-hour mark. Yeah, production is recording is consumption all at once. Yep. But that is the 2-hour mark. And I actually have stuff because I've got to go pay the bills and do things to pay the bills. We're going to finish this paragraph. We'll do that. This will be good. You got to finish the paragraph. I got to finish the paragraph. I feel like I've read the paragraph like 9 times already, but we're not even close. We're about halfway. No, Brooks is not doing an OnlyFans. Very cute. You're funny. Funny. By what measure can we say that the agent is conscious of not speaking, of remaining silent, of acting or not acting, deciding or remaining undecided? This is going to be really important. It's rhetorical here. We're not actually asking the question because the next bit is the answer for it. He's setting himself up because it's about, do we have direct access to our own states? Or does consciousness emerge only in specific relational configuration? And that's his point. Quote, only in terms of a more or less unequal exchange between the impulses and the signs of everyday code. The unequal exchange here is going to be incredibly important because this is about just, if you've read Logic of Sense, when I talk about homogeneous or heterogeneous series, this is what we're kind of talking about here. It's the same exact thing. The way that there's an unequal exchange between things that are orders, series, elements, sets that are heterogeneous, that don't normally work together or come together. My piece on Monday, I talked through the idea of Yelmslev's concept of language, where fire, as we talk about fire, right? We use these words and we have these semiotics in particular specific ways because the way fire works doesn't work on a single register. We feel the heat on our skin. Maybe we feel a burn. We see the flicker of light. We smell the burniness of things. We feel the pressure of movement that is caused by it. These are separate elements, separate registers entirely. Yet we have a word, fire, that covers all of those things and brings them together. They're heterogeneous elements or heterogeneous sets that pull into a single word. And this is kind of one of the things of semiotics and how semiotics works. When we use words, we tend to mean things that are naturally more heterogeneous. We don't have words for things that are homogeneous often. We usually use words for things that are more complex than just the single thing. Well, with this, the heterogeneous orders of reality that exist, the way that they aren't the same, it's not like there's an equal exchange between all of these things. They can't. They're different. You can't just bring them all in. They're different. This is not equality. It's equivocation. You bring them all in, but you do so naturally, unequally, because of the way that reality is sort of ordered in a heterogeneous way. So with this, the impulses are going to operate by intensities, by affects, but signs operate according to meanings and reference. Okay? And so as such, that exchange is about translation between incommensurable orders of things, because there is naturally in that structural inequality in intaking things. There's things lost in translation as it happens. And so this variable amount of inequality that exists there is not about a fixed opposition. It's all of it is economic thing. Ultimately, this is the flux. This is the nature of flux.
Division of labor, Brooks?
Sure. Yes.
Different positions, the different repetition. Deleuze talked about the different positions and like in relation to this kind of idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like the idea knows nothing about negation, right? It knows nothing, but like it's about different positions and kind of, yeah.
But it is not the agent. But is not the agent, I'm right in the middle of the page, sorry, but is not the agent unconscious of what these impulses are willing for themselves? Because the impulses that work together to create these heterogeneous elements that ultimately get built into the semiotic structure, the agent is not understanding what the many intellects of the body are creating for themselves, or the goals they have for themselves, as if they were autonomous sort of agents themselves, that these impulses exist, and they're trying to do things, but the consciousness doesn't have access to that. And again, saying that the impulses themselves have their own willing is itself fairly radical. We've already said that the consciousness doesn't have it's not unconscious or conscious, but consciousness doesn't have will. It's not thinking through this, but it's also not thinking through this. There is a lot of wills happening, but like the agent's unconsciousness is not contingent ignorance. It's structural exclusion. The agent isn't like, no, I don't want to know that stuff. It's not hiding from it. It structurally cannot have access to it. It's constituted precisely through its disconnection from impulse willing. Remember, we just went through that. The impulses to the semiotics to agent. The semiotic is through reason and referent, you might say, logic and referent. But the impulses are reactive, and they have their own intellects entirely. They have their own setup entirely. Right? So, they say, hence the inequality of the exchange, the fact the impulses lose out in the transaction. An intention is formed through the signs minus their impulsive intensity. The intensity oscillates while thought as such is being formed. But once the declaration is produced, it is reduced to the inertia of signs. The temporal way thought formation works is a process. I fucking love this book a lot, by the way. I hope you're enjoying it too. The temporal structuration of thought formation as a process itself exists in this way. Intensification followed by crystallization. There is a dynamic, fluctuating character of the preconscious process. But the inertia of signs that he's referring to, and this is my video on Monday, very heavy on this one, linguistics tends to have a deadening effect. Like when we add words to it, it tends to remove any, like it's got its own setup, its own thing, its own inertia, as he says here. And so when we're talking, it's oscillation of all of these things, like think fast coming together, the flux, but then the formation happens and then inertia of that. And so thoughts and all of that feel dead compared to the generative impulses of things. Haha, how much I show for this reading? Think I was getting paid? Think I was getting paid for it too. Where then does the ebbing flow of the intensity go? So that the flow of the ebbing flow, the vibration, there's excess, it's lost. Where does it go? what happens? What the intensity, is it just lost? Because we have it. It's the heterogeneous processes of the unconscious, effectively, this mass of impulses that's interacting together, and it's crushed, but there's intensity lost. It's energy lost, but energy doesn't get lost. That's not how it works. Where does it go? Well, it overflows the fixity of signs and continues on, as it were, in their intervals. Each interval, thus each silence, belongs, outside the linkage of signs, to the fluctuations of an impulsive intensity. Intensity exceeds the containing capacity of sign systems, right? Signs that are fixed are static compared to dynamic, right? The fixity of signs continues on, as it were, in their intervals. This is the intervals, the breaks, and the flux, you might say, from Anti-Oedipus. You might literally fucking say that. When we say breaks in flux in Anti-Oedipus, you might literally be saying that here. Sorry, go ahead.
You mean the breaks and flux that we read throughout Anti-Oedipus? Like, this is kind of the section?
This is exactly that when they phrase it. Because a lot of people think breaks. Oh, no, wait. Breaks is an interval. Gaps, silences between signs. This is actual intensity overflow. Each silence, which is, again, thinking of it as almost thinking of silence. And again, it's a specific silence that exists outside the linkage of signs. This exists beyond semiotic activity. So, rather than being destroyed or repressed, so fuck Freud, fuck Lacan, maybe disagree significantly with Deleuze and Guattari soon. Rather than being destroyed or repressed, okay, intensities continue to operate in non-signifying spaces that allow signification to be possible. This is, by the way, in Deleuze. A lot of people misunderstand this. Silence is not the absence of speech or the absence of intensity. It is actually a positive space of continuation, of structuration. Yes, this is basically Derrida, but also Deleuze, which is fucking crazy to say as a sentence. I just said that. Because I'd say Derrida's thing of spacing is that, but he kind of makes it purely textual. Deleuze keeps it in the fluctuation, the energetic, the vivacious, the voluptuous. And this is the synthesis of that. Silence is not the absence of speech. It is actually the positive space that enables the continuation of intensities. It is the framing, you could say. I won't yet, but you could. Because it's a lot. This is not about the depth of one's psyche. Really quick, go ahead.
Why is this, in your view, going against the view of Freud and Lacan?
Because Freud and Lacan both believe in repression and the unconscious, like as a held back thing.
Yes, something that's stored, right?
Yes. And this is
like in the okay.
And this is just saying no. It's for Klossowski, there is no storage. Instead, what's happening is it's actually the silences are the. I don't want to say the expression of it because that's probably the wrong word, but the way it works is that impulses and intensities operate in non-signifying space that makes signification possible.
Right, as opposed to something that's repressed, like the intensity it's going to be like an ebb and flow of signification and silence and so on, and that's what makes the whole thing possible.
Yeah, it's positive. It's a positive view of silence and not repression, but instead a continuation or one of the I'm connecting this. I'm not saying to do this, but in my head, I am connecting this, and I'm going to bring it in just for a moment. One of the things that's very difficult for me when I was first getting into Deleuze's theory of art is the way that he talks about the canvas. Because a canvas is empty, and canvas doesn't have to have anything on it, but by existing in the way that it does, it enables the rest of the writing. It enables the rest of the painting. The canvas is necessary, the boundaries. Silence is doing that. This is a spacing for Derrida, which is very much this fucking language. And I cannot imagine Derrida didn't at least find something in Klossowski to pull from. But the very idea of spacing is about that gives continuation or structuration to the things that are expressed or are signified. And one of the things that has always bothered me about the idea of the negative space, or that there is something not said or someone is repressed, is, oh, I'm not speaking there. Well, then wait. So what is the space between words or between sentences or between sentiments, I think would be better said. When I am talking still, I'm obviously not pausing. There are spaces, but I'm not taking a moment for silence. I'm plowing through what I'm understanding this to be. But at some point there is a silence, sometimes even a very awkward silence, that I'm able to sort of allow to sit. And that gives not only a power to my point of a finality, but it also gives it a structuration that you people can also respond to. But also it ends my point, and it is another expression of the same intensities. Empty Planet for Weirdos. Empty canvas is essential for creation. It's not that it's an empty canvas, I think and that's Deleuze's point, is there's no such thing as an empty canvas. There's no such thing as silence that doesn't have meaning or that doesn't have impulses behind it. I know.
Literally chapter 1 of Cinema, which we just read.
Yes, it is. This is literally out of Cinema. It's hard for me not to pull in so many other fucking books, but it's. This is not the desert of the BWO. This is different. Because this is it is expressed silence. In the Cinema series, and you can, it's almost the old joke of people who listen to music and go, listen to the notes they're not playing, that kind of thing. There's a truth there. There's moments in music, moments in experience that are just as energetic despite being silent. The drop in a techno song, for example. These things have themselves intensity and expression, and they help structurate everything else. It's such a good sentiment.
That's why Nietzsche was drawn to music, I guess. Right? And he talk about it.
So it's a lot of those things. Goddamn 92, that's a fucking deep cut. John Cage copyright strike. That's a deep cut. That's a fucking deep cut. That's like Family Guy on hard mode reference. Good job. Yeah. It overflows the fixity of signs, continues on in their intervals. Each interval, each silence, belongs to the fluctuations of an impulsive intensity. Is this the unconscious? In itself, this term is merely a designation of the code of everyday science that is applied afterward. That's a direct aim at Lacan and Freud. That's a direct aim. The unconscious is a stage play of symbols that are dancing and playing on stage. What then is it that requires even the most lucid agent to remain unconscious of what is going on within itself? Nietzsche knows, for example, as he writes his notes on impulses, that such impulses are acting in him, but that there is no accord between the observations that he is transcribing and the impulses that have compelled him to write them. But if he is conscious of what he is writing, as the agent named Nietzsche, it is because he knows not only that he is ignorant of what has just occurred in order for him to write, but also that he must be ignorant of it if he wants to write and think. Love it, LJ. Nietzsche's project is fascinating. Because there is and Nietzsche I don't think he openly acknowledges it, but I think it is implicit in how a lot of people read his stuff. But again, Klossowski's reading, I think, is phenomenal. There's a weird performative contradiction in how Nietzsche does his shit, right? Because I mean, it's what he's laying here. Nietzsche knows that as he writes his note of impulses, such impulses are acting in him. There's no accord between the observation, like what Nietzsche's writing is kind of this weird thing and paradoxical way of this reflexive consciousness that is being sort of displayed via Nietzsche. The agent named Nietzsche, for example, that's like the way he's phrasing it. He knows not only he is ignorant of what has just occurred in order for him to write, but also he must be ignorant of it if he wants to write and think. If you have ever, like all I can think is this is the worst way to do this, but just to give an example of a way that I've experienced this, or maybe you can too. If you haven't done something for a long time, for me, I haven't ridden a bike for a while, and you actually really are in a weird, over self-aware place and you try to think through every step, you will fall over. It is bad. In order to do the thing that Nietzsche's doing, he needs to also be sort of enabling his unconscious to function as it does. A total self-awareness would ruin Nietzsche's project. Like that would fuck everything up. Like it would absolutely do that. Right? It's such a fucking interesting way he's phrasing this. Sorry, I like the phrasing of this. Because Nietzsche doesn't write about this thing, but that he's also necessarily ignorant of it. He must be ignorant in order to write about it. Fuck. At the very moment, he is necessarily ignorant of what he is about to call the combat of the impulses among themselves. When the combat of impulses is occurring, at that very moment, there is a battle through the mental life of Nietzsche's existence that is not unified. It is in agony. It is impulses fighting and battling. It is not consciousness revealing consciousness as effect, rather than it's not consciousness a thing. It's consciousness revealing itself as effect rather than a participant in the fundamental struggles that Nietzsche's talking about. Right? God damn, my brain is slowly fucking dying. Thank God we're nearing the end of this. And that's the last line. Even if he stops writing, even if he tries to stop thinking, could we say that he is therefore abandoning himself to the unconscious in the form of an extravagant reverie? Stopping conscious activity would not give him access to the unconsciousness. Because, again, the unconscious is not a domain, psychologically or otherwise. It is a feature of consciousness. The unconscious thing is what happens when consciousness stops. But it's not what happens when consciousness stops. It's what makes consciousness possible. It's not a binary. This is coextensive. Again, coextensive. The unconscious and the conscious are coextensive. Jesus. I want to take a nap. 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 I need to take a nap. I want to take a nap. I want to take a nap. You don't think you can truly stop thinking? Well, I think that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point, is like, because he doesn't say if he does stop thinking, but it's like, hey, can we get to the unconscious? No, because the unconscious is not a separate domain. The unconscious isn't like over here, and if I could only quiet my mind, I could get to that. It's like, no, the unconscious is this thing that is interacting, is coextensive with consciousness. These things come together. They don't operate differently. Yeah, him to perceive it wouldn't be there anymore. So how would he perceive it? Because the conscious mind that's able to perceive, that sees itself, like, it's such a fucked up, like a Gordian knot of shit. It's so wild. Does Nietzsche draw on Hume at all? I mean, yeah. I think, let me see. I had some writing on that. One sec. Because he wrote, where did he write it? He wrote a bunch about him. I think he said something like Hume was the only Englishman he liked. Something like that. There was some weird... he hated Brits except for Hume. There was some phrasing there. So self-help books on meditation were lying. I know, Sanators. Isn't it awful? And the Western version of Zen mysticism, also lying. It's very sad. August says, yes, very much. We have something about in the QC. I know, I was trying to find the specific thing because there's a couple little bits that specifically goes into it. But Nietzsche's fragments, he wrote about Hume a few times. It's all very seeming positive, but also, I mean, he didn't like British people in general, certainly British thinkers. But I think his critique of Hume is not wildly different than what Deleuze ended up doing with him in empiricism and subjectivity. Because, so for Hume, the reasons and passions were opposed. As we were literally reading here, as Klossowski reads them, and I think as others read them, Nietzsche did not believe that reason and passions were opposed, that they're the same thing, just different outward expressions of it, I guess you could say. But even, not even different outward expressions, that they are the same thing, more or less.
I
have a
be
question.
careful about saying
Go for it,
he
Ben.
believed reasons and passions were opposed.
I know. I'm being very broad.
Reason is a passion.
Reason is also a passion. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't the phrase in ENS, reason is a passion on the way to socialization? Something like that.
Yeah. But even more than that, reason itself is a passion.
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
Fair. It's been a while since I did my Hume, but even Deleuze is doing weird stuff in that with Hume. Like, that's not Hume. Hume very much played in a different way, didn't he? No?
Mainstream Hume scholarship sucks.
Mainstream Hume scholarship sucks. Well, mainstream scholarship sucks, so we can just save a word there.
Here when it says Nietzsche, it's because he knows not only that he's ignorant of what has just occurred in order for him to write, but also that he must be ignorant of it if he wants to write and think. What does... So first, is it...
Yeah, it's a hell of a sentence. It's a hell of a sentence. You're right, it's a hell of a sentence. Yeah. Go for it. Sorry.
It meant like his impulses in his body, or like the fluctuations of his intensities, and that he's not trying to look into himself. What I mean, I'm not sure if that's like because that, like, by turning away from himself, then he can write an aphorism or whatever else, like, or that's how I understand that sentence. But I don't know. What do you think?
So I think he's being more literal there than anything else, and it's kind of a
Right.
because as Klossowski is talking about Nietzsche, he's talking about Nietzsche writing about his observations on his own thought and impulses. So, if Nietzsche is conscious of what he's writing, as the agent named Nietzsche, if he's aware of these things, like at that one point, it is because he knows not only that he is ignorant of what just occurred in order for him to write. He's not a moment ago thinking about that. He's actually writing the thing he is conscious of and aware of his writing. You can't have both of those parts in your brain, basically, at once. Like, it's, what is he thinking about? What is dealing with it? What is setting up for all of this? And it is about what is the knowledge that his self has. It's he knows not only he is ignorant of what just occurred in order for him to write, but also that he must be ignorant of it if he wants to write and think. If he wants to just write, like, this is where it's so fucking complicated. There's a lot here. Like, this entire paragraph is like, honestly, we could spend probably a few more hours just going back over it. Consciousness arrives after and only after the processes that make it possible, that produce the conditions for it, right? And so Nietzsche, writing about these things, is aware, more or less, that he is ignorant of things, but the strategic ignorance isn't a limitation for him to overcome. It's actually important for the very production of the intellectual capacities itself. If he were completely transparent as a thing, he wouldn't be able to write or think, because he would be aware of the impulses that produce the semiotic structures and then the thing that's come out, the outcome of them. So, yeah. Jesus Christ. Nietzsche's writing about himself. But because consciousness arrives after the processes, there is necessarily an ignorance of other things that there has to be there. That gap of things, the temporal gap between the impulse and awareness, and there is one, there is a irreducible gap between the transformation of one into the other, cannot be closed without destroying the possibility of awareness itself. Jesus. Yeah, I think so. Actually, I want to rethink about that, but I'm going to generally say I think I agree with myself there, but I'm not positive. Oh, God. My brain.
Just in the genealogy of morality, there is in the preface, I think Nietzsche talks about like the necessity of forgetting about oneself.
Yes.
To get something home, to bring something home or something like that.
Well, he talks about forgetting is like one of the most important digestive processes of the mind for Nietzsche. And he does talk about it of forgetting the self, but here it's like, because, sorry, just to read it again. Let's start slightly backwards. Nietzsche knows, for example, as he writes his notes on the impulses, that such impulses are acting in him, but there is no accord between the observations he is transcribing and the impulses that have compelled him to write them. As he writes his notes on the impulses, such impulses are also doing that thing. But there's no accord between the observations he is transcribing and the impulses that have compelled him. But if he is conscious of what he is writing, Oh, this feels like my brain is going to have to untie this one. That's 2.5 hours. Yep, that's going to be it. All right. We will come back and redo parts of this paragraph again next week. Because that is, everyone keeps reminding me, because we all have learned we can go well over 2 hours. We've done that before. It is very bad for a lot of reasons. It's very bad. 2 hours is fucking solid. So with that, I want to affirm Brooks assumes I'm supposed to famous quote. Reason is not to be only slave. Hey, this is why we don't go long, because we're going to